Well, good afternoon, folks, and welcome back to the farm. I'm just here with our chickens, and today we're going to focus on part 2 of our Confessions of a Homestead. So yesterday we looked at some of the survival-based things that we got to deal with on the homestead, just to manage your order of priorities so that you don't get overwhelmed in the homestead. Today we're going to talk about well, the elephant in the room. So there's 2 big elephants that we're going to deal with today, and the first one is the grocery store, and the second one is the cost of lumber. So what better place to talk about the price of groceries than right here in the chicken house where half our groceries come from. Yesterday what I said is that food and growing your own food is in fact one of the lowest strategic priorities when you're trying to build your own homestead. Oftentimes when you're moving to the country or you're moving, getting out on your homestead, one of the first things you want to do is get set up growing your own food. I want a garden, but there is a ton of work required to prep your garden. Even just to choose the place where the garden's got to be. If you choose the wrong place, you're gonna regret it forever, and you're gonna end up moving it. So we did have actually a very poor experience with our first year with the garden because of soil conditions, because of just our inability to manage and upkeep it in some respects, as well as the fact that we had a very poor growing year. So that's really all it takes to just, keep you mainline in the grocery store, because if you don't, you're going to starve. So it's fine to have that conversation, say, yes, you know what, I want to be somewhat self-reliant. Yes, I want to grow my own food, but it's a huge investment. There's got to be some thought put to it. And it's a rare thing when you can become, 100%, non-reliant on the grocery chains. So here's why I've said it before and I'll say it again. I hate the grocery stores, and I don't hate the grocery stores because of, I think they're evil or anything like that. But I do think that, a lot of what's for sale in the grocery store has traveled a whole lot of miles and doesn't really contribute to, a healthy planet. I also think they're a massive contributor to wastage. So just the packaging alone that goes, for everything that goes to the grocery store, everything's wrapped in plastic, right? So, and then contributing to that, also the amount of waste, so the excess that they have to buy in order to have stuff in stock. So the amount of food that, hits a not an expiry date, but a best before date, and then goes in the trash and then goes to a landfill. Just a huge cycle of waste. So the next thing I want to talk about, well, maybe I don't want to talk about it, is the price of lumber. And the price of lumber is just a metaphor, really, for how much it costs to establish yourself on your homestead. So this is a real challenge because the marketing doesn't match the reality. So we've got so-called, I would say, glamour homesteaders, right? The famous homesteaders. You got guys like Al Lumna, Justin Rhodes out there pitching it, and the thousands, literally tens of thousands of dollars that they're making off of advertising and stuff through their YouTube channels is never talked about. And so people like, well, okay, how do you manage this? You just basically, you farm and you're self-sustaining and you make all this money. And that's not the reality, right? A few of those there, Justin's pretty transparent. They don't make any revenue off their farm. Everything is off of content creation. But if you missed that snippet and you just thought, wow, they just milk their cows every day, and they have a couple of sheep, and they somehow are able to feed all these kids, and how is that possible? Well, the reality is infrastructure is very, very expensive. So we see lots of folks coming into they get their first piece of land, they're looking for advice, and that first trip to the hardware store is a shocking eye-opener for them. Absolutely. It's just like, oh my goodness. So we just recently priced out a pole barn, and it's $76,000 was one of the quotes that came in. The other quote was quite a bit lower than that, but nevertheless, worst case scenario, we're looking at $76,000 to build just a shell of a pole barn, like nothing fancy, just a shell. So that's one reason why, and you see this building behind me and that building both, when we tried to acquire things like chicken houses or sheep shelters. We got a sheep shelter over here. We're using reclaimed, repurposed materials, or in the case of these two, repurposed buildings. This was an old granary actually at a farm over on Range Road 105, just a few miles down the road. That was an oil storage shed in an industrial park in Grand Prairie that just had barrels in it. and we did a conversion, and it still costs money because we still had to insulate, we still had to put vapor barrier, we still had to put OSB on the inside, build all the roofs, all this stuff. But at least the bones of it, we didn't have to go through all that expense. Now, when I'm talking about expense, so year one, you know, was when we got our first batch of animals. We got 5 sheep, and one of them was a ram, and so we bred them, and then we get the lambs, and we tried to sell the lambs, and you know, we really don't know what the price is, you know, what are they worth, and what is our cost. Ultimately, what it comes down to is, when, you know, in the onset, in the early years, you're gonna need, and unless you're a self-made millionaire already when you get into this, you're gonna need some off-farm or off homestead income. Like you can't quit your day job, absolutely not. And that is the reality here. I mean, we have 40 eggs a day coming out of our chicken house, and we have, you know, maybe 30 lambs that we sell every year, a couple of pigs. And it's enough to give a good lifestyle to us. It's enough to give a little bit of, you know, offset on the expenditure side. So at least, you know, if we're going to lose money, we're not losing as much money. But just don't be naive and, you know, follow, you know, the YouTube gods and thinking that, you know, okay, well, if I just get into cutting my own wood and butchering my own pigs, suddenly I'm going to live like a king, because that is not the case at all. All right, so you're gonna have to forgive me for this little tangent here, because it just kind of sprung into my mind. There is another elephant in the room, something that we really don't talk about very often. And that's because there's a trend that everybody wants to have, you know, the lifestyle. They want to have the homesteading lifestyle, but that comes at a cost. And quite often folks don't want to give up some of the perks, some of the, you know, the fun things that they had in the inner city or, you know, in the urban setting. And that's, you know, going away for the weekend, or going away for 3 or 4 days. And how do you manage that? And honestly, there's certain situations where you can, but you're at risk, right? And so the risk of something called slippage. So slippage is the losses you take when you're not on farm. And so, because that's when things are going to go wrong. If you're not around, things are going to go sideways, right? So if you've got a system set up for automatic feed, automatic water, you're only going away in the summer months, you've got the contingencies built in so that people can come in and check your animals, that's fantastic. But if you want to live out in the boonies somewhere where there's nobody around, you're off-grid, you don't have automatic waters, you don't have automatic feeders, and you still want to go away for the weekend, you're going to have to convince somebody to come and stay on your homestead to maintain your stuff, because otherwise you're going to come back to a dead goat. That's the reality. Anyways, I don't want to be a source of discouragement for anybody. That's not the intent of this video. The intent of this video is obviously just as a learning tool. Say, hey, you know what? Here's some things you need to know before you jump in with both feet, so that you're not, you know, you're not naive about it, and then you're not floundering because you find yourself struggling to get through it, and you very quickly lose the passion that you once had for getting into this rural, you know, self-sustaining, less reliant on mainstream kind of lifestyle. Anyways, on that note, I want to hear from you. What's the one thing that well, maybe it's more than one thing. What did you wish you knew when you got into this whole homesteading, you know, getting out of the city, going country? What was the big lesson? What was the one thing you wish you would have known before starting out that you've learned obviously now, maybe even the hard way? Let us know in the comments section down below. While you're there, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. For now, I'm gonna go in and get myself a bite of supper, maybe a cup of tea, so I'll let you go. I hope you have a fantastic evening. We'll see you tomorrow.